bear with me, we'll get there in the end. I just need to warm up the old brain. Let's give it a go. So this wasn't the original build. I had in mind, or bought the kit and got it out of the box ready to start. And for whatever reason, it went back in the box. Not because of the contents or anything like that. I don't know why. For its age, it's not a bad kit. It may be the next build, but no promises. So I do love the Matchbox dioramas, and it's a pity we don't see that anymore now. Maybe in this scale. I know with 1/35 scale Militaria, supplying a diorama for that scale of kit will be quite expensive. And not only that, I think dioramas are a very personal thing. So you're not going to grab everybody to buy it. In other words, let them buy the vehicles and let them do their own dioramas. But Matchbox, for whatever reason, always seem to hit the spot with their dioramas. There's a couple that I didn't like. One was the Comet, sat on a mound in plastic. And the other one, which I thought was ostentatious, was the Sherman going over the bridge. Anyway, what I do want to say, and I'm over the moon, are the new Airfix releases. The Jaguar T-Bird, wow. The Phantom, at last. A new tooled 1/48 scale Phantom. And I'm thinking and hoping that the RAF one shouldn't be too long in the pipeline, surely. Can't wait for that. And of course the camera this year for kits looks really exciting. For me anyway. Let me know in the comments what you think about Airfix's new releases. I've only heard positive things. So let's get on and see what I did with this old kit. So the box has seen better days, haven't we all? But let's take a look around it anyway. We've got two colour options here, but take them with a pinch of salt. In other words, do your homework. Now, unfortunately, I was never very good at homework. Now, the figures for the size are pretty good in detail. It's just a pity they're a bit wooden in pose. A very nice looking canvas top. Must do more to improve this crest. So my only criticism are the diorama parts. They're all a bit soft, giving that melted look, almost chocolate looking. And of course we have the tracks. Now if I can replace these, I will do. Easier said than done. So first thing I've got in my mind that I'm itching to do is to drill some holes in these wheels. Nothing like wasting your time. So rather than just thinking about it all the time, I'll just get on with it. Otherwise I'm going to be here all day. So I lost the clips of the finished wheels drilled out. This clip here is just me dry fitting the wheels to the body framework. Just to say that I had a lot of trouble with them. They're very fiddly or wobbly. Now when I put on the outer wheels, I found that they overlap the rubber tracks, which I hopefully will be replacing. So this meant I had to thin the outer wheels down quite considerably, just so they sit with inside the track, or flush with it. Does it look worth it? Bit late now, it's done. So with the wheels left to set, I'll make a start on the other assemblies.
So all this seems to be fitting very well. I've had no major issues. So I've got as far as I want with the half track, and the canvas top, I won't be showing that, I'll be leaving it off. It will be an easy option just to glue it on. The PAK40 is next. These assemblies are getting smaller. Now the only trouble I had with the PAK40 were the spade plates. On the illustrations it's not clear on the orientation. So I had to look at some photographs of the real thing to make sure that they're in the right orientation. Back to the half track, and I added the 4 shell housing doors, and of course there was a gap here. Of course, not necessarily of course, but there was a gap here that needed filling. So I'm going to be leaving the lower running gear off for ease of painting and adding the tracks later on. Hopefully easy. I'm also going to leave the front wheel assembly off as well. I may have to adjust them for the tracks that I added later. The last thing I want is the front of the wheels to be floating off the ground. Talking of tracks, I think I may have a solution to replace the rubber ones. These are from a 1/72 scale Revell half track. Now I know both scales are different, but comparing the rubber tracks with these plastic ones, they seem to be the same width. Either way, I have to give this a go. Anything has got to be better than those Matchbox offerings. So I've cut and cleaned most of the parts. I don't think I'll need them all. I should hope not. If I do, then that opens up another can of worms. Now the detail for 1/72 scale is pretty good, and it's a pity they didn't mould these in longer lengths. They are quite flexible and could have been bent quite easily. So I've glued all the track parts together, and I know I should have made the join at the bottom rather than the top. Never mind. Now I'm going to leave these off and paint these separately later. So by the way, I had 6 tracks left to spare, which makes sense. Now the rubber pads look oversized slightly, but a quick sanding down will tone them down. As I said, anything is better than these. Onto the figures, and I've decided to leave these 3 figures out, just because I'm lazy. But I did feel that the sidecar needed a figure. Let me know in the comments whether it was unusual for a sidecar to be unoccupied in a convoy. Now with this idea, it did mean a lot of work on this figure, cutting it out and trying to get it to fit into that sidecar. And a lot of detail will be lost in doing this. So onto the figures, painting them. And we don't want to see any more of this. I've done this loads of times. There are plenty of builds out there where I've shown the process. Back to the half track, and one thing I needed to do was to replace the rail around the centre here. I couldn't face clean up the kit parts, and we'll replace them with plastic rod. So I can start adding paint now, and my first colour is going to be a rusty black. With that dry, I'll add a shadow colour mix from these two. Next, the mix from these two. This mix will be applied mainly above and slightly on the sides. With the paint thoroughly dry, I'll tackle the next stage one side at a time. I'll damp one side of the surface with water. Next, I'll apply a medium grey in patches. The damp surface makes a grey easy to blend. Just adding some raw umber to the seats here. Do make sure you use a decent brush. So with all the base colours picked out, and once again, as I've said many times, you don't have to be neat here. The washes and the dry brushing hopefully will tighten everything up. So I've sealed all this paint in with a satin varnish, ready for the transfers. While the varnish is drying, I'll tackle the tracks. So I've given them a coat of German grey, Vallejo German grey, and then I've made a wash from these colours, and that is applied all over. So onto the diorama parts, and I don't want to spend too much time trying to improve these parts. They do look like melted chocolate, and I need to dispel that look. Now it would be quicker to start from scratch and build something completely new, but we are here to use as many of the kit parts as possible with minimum effort to improve them. The crest also needs some work as well. So I'm not too sure whether these simple fixes will work to improve these parts, but here goes. So first thing I'm going to do is sand the face, and in that process hopefully sharpen the edges of the plaster. While I'm around this area, I'll replace this placard with some plasticard. Then using a brand new scalpel blade, I'm going to define the edge around the brickwork and the plaster. So that inner wall needs some attention as well, and I'm going to score the surface horizontally and vertically to get rid of that melted chocolate look. Once I've done that, over that effect, I'll blend all the score marks in using Tamiya Extra Thin. Now once again, I don't want to spend too much time, but for the base, I'm just going to key the surface with this. It's one of the many tools I've lying around in many toolboxes. Heaven knows what all this is going to look like under a layer of paint. Next, I need to tackle that old bird. Far too chunky. So scraping all that plastic away, this looks far better. Better than that. So let's assemble the base and get on with this diorama. Now I was going to leave the crest off and paint it separately, but that seemed like too much faff. I nearly forgot, for the Swazi logo I used a thin strip of plastic card. Looks far better now. So that went together rather well, and I could almost get away without paint. Maybe not. Transfers next, and thankfully not many to add at this scale, which sounds about right. But the carrier film on these small transfers is immense. So I'm not going to seal in the transfers with a coat of varnish. I think for the very few that were added, I think this will be going overboard. Next, I'm going to add a panel wash made from these three colours. But before applying that, I'll prep the surface with some water. So with the panel wash dry, I'll add some highlights now by dry brushing this colour. So with all paintwork finished, I can start assembling this half track, starting with those tracks. The tracks were held into position with clamps and then glue added. I just need to add the figures now, but before I do that, I want to start on the base. Here I'm going to start with light washes and build up the tone. The important thing here is getting the colour right. And because I'm not used to painting dioramas, I'm going to go slowly. For me personally, I want a little bit of contrast between the vehicles and the base. In other words, the base will be toned down slightly. So with the first two washes dry, you can see how that wet colour has changed tone considerably. So to the previous wall colour, I'll add this rust. And for the ground colour, I've added this to the previous mix. I'm just going to add a little light grey around the edge of the plaster. Onto the bird. So it's all bone dry now, and I have weathered that white rendering with a little light wash of khaki, just to tone it down a bit. I'm still deciding whether to paint the window ledges. While I'm deciding that, I'll attach the figures with some PVA glue. So the base is finished, I'm happy with it. The key, personally for me, is making sure you get the colours right, or the tone. And I hope I've done that. I just need to add the vehicles. I've also added a bit more definition around the steps, the rubble and the bird by adding a colour mix of grey and khaki. So just to say, all the colour mixes added to this diorama have all been very light washes. 70% water to 30% colour. Even 80% water to 20% colour sometimes. The idea of the wash is that it will find all the detail on the surface. So I hope you like what I've done with this old kit, and I hope to see you later for the next build.